If you're a fan of learning about covert CIA major projects and some elements that have certainly lived on in pop culture and possibly a little bit in the conspiracy theory realm, then today's book just might be for you. Today, I'll be reviewing Project MK Ultra, the history of the CIA's controversial human experimentation program by the Charles River editors. Welcome to Spencer Reads Everything. I'm your host, Spencer Duncan, and today I'm covering a book that, I'm not gonna lie, it was not a great book. Let me just explain why exactly I read this book and then try to give you guys what I think most people are here for, and that would be a little bit of details about what Project MK Ultra was. I actually, as a history professor, at the end of the semester, I sometimes let my students pick a topic that they want to learn more about, and they usually pick some pretty broad topics. They want to talk about the history of immigration, or the history of nation states, or the history of wars and conflicts, or something like that. And I had one student this last semester that wanted to learn a little bit more about Project MK Ultra. She actually, I'm pretty sure, already knew a fair amount, and in my effort to prepare for that class, I read this book, actually listened to it because it was the only one that Audible had, and I didn't find any on Libby, and so this is the book that I chose, and I quickly discovered that it's not a great book, but I also quickly discovered that it is certainly a topic that a lot of people are interested in, at least certain elements of the internet, and so I will certainly give you a little bit of what I think you are looking for. Just my actual review of the book itself is it's way too short. I'm not sure who the author was. The Charles River editors seems to be something close to AI that just kind of puts together Wikipedia articles. So I had to do a whole bunch of my own independent research to really be of any help to this student. But I just thought for sure that I would review this book and maybe give a little more detail about what some people might be curious about when it comes to this idea of Project MK Ultra. So this is my review summary slash just a little bit of detail about the history of Project MK Ultra. Project MK Ultra was a human experimentation program orchestrated by the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency to develop methods and substances that could be utilized in interrogations to weaken individuals and extract confessions through brainwashing and psychological torture. The term MK Ultra is a CIA cryptonym, where MK signifies the Office of Technical Service and Ultra is an arbitrary term that was chosen from a dictionary to name the project, and it just sounded cool. And the program has been widely criticized as a violation of individual rights and an abuse of power by the CIA. And of course, it was noted for its lack of consent and its undermining of democratic values, and in some cases, possibly being responsible for the death of individuals. It was initiated in 1953 and it terminated in 1973. So for 20 years, this project was going on. And so it had a variety of iterations, and of course, the concepts and the scope of it varied within that 20 years. The MK Ultra employed a variety of techniques to alter its subjects' mental states and brain functions. One of the main things that MK Ultra was looking at, or at least is the one that has come down to us through the years, is the idea of truth serum, so trying to give people some kind of drug or something that could force them to tell the truth. Or the other one is, of course, some kind of brain control. This is where you get the idea of the Manchurian Candidate, and all of that is going to be a product of MK Ultra and how it was making its way into the public. And of course, a lot of that was being either exaggerated or just being turned into these novel concepts. But in some cases, you actually are going to have some significant byproducts of it. Probably the most famous one is the experiments that were done with LSD, and in many ways helping to develop the creation of LSD on account of the project and to mainstream it. All of that was a product of MK Ultra, because there was a sense that it could be used for that. Of course, in addition to stuff like LSD, they administered other high doses of a variety of psychoactive drugs and other chemicals, just whatever came out of their research, and frequently without the subject's knowledge or consent. And additional techniques involve stuff like electroshock therapy, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, isolation, verbal and even sexual abuse, and just all sorts of forms of what we would considered torture. That was all stuff that was being engaged in this name of national security or for the sake of science. And so you can see how it was being justified. And that's not the first or last time that we have seen those being reasons people justify doing some pretty awful things, particularly torture. Project MK Ultra actually followed Project Artichoke and was managed by the CIA's Office of Scientific Intelligence in coordination with the United States Army Biological Warfare Laboratories. The program engaged in illegal activities, including the non-consensual use of US and Canadian citizens as test subjects. The scope of MK Ultra was pretty extensive, with activities that conducted under the guise of research at over 80 institutions, including most notably universities, as well as hospitals and prisons and pharmaceutical companies, in addition to actual military facilities. The CIA actually operated through front organizations, so some senior officials at these institutions were aware of the agency's involvement. There was always a complicated question of the involvement between the CIA and then this actual organization, and that was always one of the things when a lot got declassified, was frequently finding out that both actually frequently knew more than was supposed, or the flip side was that is just pointing fingers and blaming people. There seems to be, in some cases, ongoing disputes. The public actually first became aware of Project MK Ultra in 1975 through investigations by the Church Committee, which was led by Senator Frank Church, hence the name, and the Rockefeller Commission, which was initiated by President Gerald Ford. And there were deliberate efforts to uncover the full extent of the program, but they were frequently hindered by the CIA director, particularly Richard Helms, and there were many directives to destroy all MK Ultra records in 1973. And so as a result, the investigations relied on the testimony of participants, and the limited documents that did survive were frequently purged. In 1977, a Freedom of Information Act request revealed a cache of over 20,000 documents related to MK Ultra, which prompted Senate hearings, and some of the program's details were actually further declassified in 2001. So you can see how this would be so incredibly salacious, and why there'd be so much interest in well, what happened during these, but also the fact at the same time there's this idea that it was incredibly widespread, which it was. 80 institutions, a sizable amount, yet because so much got destroyed, there are always a lot of lingering questions. On top of that, it's worth noting this started in the 1950s, just after World War II, and there is certainly a sense that much of this came out of the wake of terrible experiments, human experiments that were being done throughout World War II, most notably in concentration camps, and so there's certainly a sense of already be connected to this pretty heinous element in world history, but obviously with time, with the much wider spread use of drugs, also with the additional conflicts in Korea and in Vietnam, but also the much larger intelligence apparatus of the United States after World War II, all of that just led to all sorts of things that the CIA frequently had their fingers in. And so almost anything that has since come out in the years that has, had any connection to the CIA, very frequently there's been questions of permission and consent. And so frequently, whenever you find out about something, there's a tendency to suggest, well, was this related to in any way to Project MK Ultra? Because like I said, it continues to live on in the public imagination, and there is always going to be questions of what all we can find out. Like I said, in 2001, more documents had been released, although I couldn't tell you exactly how fascinating those were, and I don't know how many more things are being held on to, but we do know that because of the nature of how we classify documents, that there's probably always going to be more and more things that can be released. But it's not just the question of consent, but the fact that it deals with stuff like LSD, hypnosis, truth serum. I mean, it's just bringing in so many different components of a Cold War world that just makes it an easy thing to have a lot of questions about. And I'm not saying that it's not interesting. There's absolutely some interesting elements to it. It just gets really hard to untangle not just what is fact and fiction, but what is always actually connected to this project versus what are some of the things that are just kind of being folded into something else because it matches the time period and it matches this sensational element. I remember clear up through the 80s and 90s watching movies where there'd be this idea of like a truth serum, which you no longer see in movies because it actually was never really all that successful, but that was very much something that was coming out of what was being done during Project MK Ultra. culture. And so those are the types of things that you can see reverberate clear through well past the end of the project in the early 70s. You can see it continuing in pop culture in the 90s and the 2000s, even to this day. And you'll start to see some changes. We no longer talk about stuff like truth serum, but you certainly see a continued conversation over conspiracy theories and the questions of how much is the government controlling. Just to think of something a little more recent that you could certainly tie to this same vein of thought, even though it wouldn't actually be connected to MK Ultra. Something like Eagle Eye, that movie with Shia LaBeouf that came out, I think close to 20 years ago, but it something similar where it shows this idea of the government having its fingers in all sorts of control and all these different methods that the government is trying to supposedly create a safe and secure America in the wake of the war on terror in particular. So you can see the through line in much of the conversation, even though obviously the project ended long before it. I think that's enough for me on Project MK Ultra. I hope this whetted the appetite for people that wanted to know a little bit more, although I'm imagining that if you already knew anything about MK Ultra and you clicked on this video, it's probably a big disappointment. But I just wanted to give a little review of the book. I didn't think the book was well done, but it certainly does touch upon a subject that could be endlessly fascinating to someone. So who would I recommend this book for? Well, almost nobody. If you want to know anything about Project MK Ultra, probably gonna have to go find a much better researched book than this. Or if you want to know more about government conspiracies or just covert operations, I don't have a great recommendation, but I wouldn't recommend this book specifically. But if you do have more suggestions, I would greatly appreciate them in the comments. I can't say that it's something I'm super interested in. I'm not by any means suggesting that diving into conspiracies is a way that I want to spend my time, but this was something real that did happen. And so if there's a better book to give it a little more detail, I would greatly appreciate the recommendations. Please let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on those notifications, and until next time, keep those pages turning.